Welcome to the finale of Bake It Better with me, Kai, and we are celebrating all of the work that we've done to become better bakers by making a layer cake. And I'm using our classic birthday cake recipe, which is on our website. You can use whatever recipe you want, but this is an awesome place to start. And I'm going to show you how you can get it out of the pan easily, how you can assemble the layers, how you can fill them, what is a crumb coat, why you need to do one, and then some easy ways to decorate your layer cake that look professional. So let's get started. When your cake layers come out of the oven, use a butter knife or a dull spatula to loosen the edges of the cake from the sides of the pan so that it doesn't stick. This has then been cooling about 15 minutes right in the pan, so now it's cool enough to touch. So to get it out of the pan, you want to use a pretty flat plate so that it doesn't bend the sides. This is my cake plate. It was my grandma's. It's perfect because it's really flat. And you're going to put it upside down on the top of the cake pan and then carefully flip it over. And make sure that this isn't too hot, and then just lift it up. And then we're going to flip it over one more time so that it can rest side up. It's okay if some of the bottom sticks to the bottom of the cake pan. That's normal. This is going to get covered in amazing silky chocolate frosting. No one will miss that small little bit. And then lift it up. So now we're going to put this whole thing into the fridge because it's about room temperature, but we want to get it cold because it will be so much easier to work with when it's a little bit firm and chilled, and we'll be able to just frost it a lot easier than if it was really soft and delicate and fresh from the oven. So I'm going to take this layer out of the pan the same way and then put it in the fridge to chill. While your cake layers are chilling, you can make your frosting or your filling if you're going to put something between the layers. You can also make a cake board. So a cake board is a round piece of food safe cardboard, and you can buy them so that they're the size of your cake pan, but you can also make one if you just run out or if you don't want to get one. So the easiest way to make them is just to trace your pan on a piece of cardboard, and then you can cover it with aluminum foil or another food safe material, and that's going to be underneath your cake layers so you can transfer it at the end when we've decorated it. It's perfect onto the serving platter without putting any fingerprints in it. So I'm going to do that now. We're ready to prep our cake assembly station. So I am going to be using a cake stand. If you're a serious cake baker, you might want to consider investing in one of these. They're really helpful. They turn like this so that you can get even sides when you're frosting or decorating your cakes. Really helpful. We sell this beautiful one on our online shop. If you're just an occasional cake baker, you might just want to make your own cake stand. So again, use a flat plate, and you can use an overturned glass or a mug, and this just helps get it at a better working level. And if you're just going to decorate your cake right on the plate that you're going to serve it on, let's pretend this is the cake, you can use little strips of paper or recycled cardboard and tuck these in around the edges so that when you're decorating, if you get any frosting on the sides, at the end, you just pull them away and you have this gorgeous clean edge. I am going to be decorating the cake on the cake stand using our homemade cake board, and then we'll transfer it using the cake board when we're ready to go. We're to the exciting part. We're gonna start assembling our cake. So first off, another pro tip, use a little bit of this gorgeous chocolate frosting if you're using the classic birthday cake recipe like I am. Get just a little bit, and you're actually going to use it as kind of an edible glue. So put just a dab on your cake stand if you're using that, and this will help hold everything in place so that you don't have any sliding around when you're trying to fill it or frost it or make things smooth. Then you want to choose your thickest layer. If they're not perfectly even, that's okay. Choose your thickest layer and put it down on your cake board. You have your first layer. Congratulations. And now comes the time to decide if you want to even off the top. So in the professional terms, we call that torting a cake. This recipe for classic birthday cake is awesome because it's pretty flat even without using cake strips or doing any extra trimming to the top. So I'm not going to trim this one. I will show you with the second layer how to trim it in case you use a different recipe or in case you do get a little bit of a dome and you want to have a perfect flat top. This bottom layer is good to go though. Next step is the filling. So for your cake, you might want to use something like a raspberry filling, a strawberry filling, maybe even a pastry cream. Or you might want to go the simple route and just put more delicious chocolate frosting into your cake. If you're going to do something that has a little bit of a thinner consistency, like a fruit filling, you want to hold all that deliciousness inside by using some of your frosting to make a moat. So if you're going to use that tip, you want to start by filling your pastry bag with some of your frosting. And I have this fitted with an open star tip because we're going to use that at the end to do some decoration. But for now, it's fine if our moat has a little bit of flair to it. You can just use a plain tip too if that's all you have. And so I've got this disposable pastry bag, it's filled, and I'm just going to use a dough scraper to get it down to the bottom. This makes such easy work of piping frosting. So now we're gonna pipe our moat as if we were going to fill this with maybe a raspberry frosting or a strawberry frosting. So I'm just turning this slightly with my left hand and applying even pressure with my right hand. This does not need to be perfect because no one's gonna see it. It's just to hold the filling inside. So now I've got this little raised border and I can fill it with all sorts of deliciousness. Just keep in mind if you do a thinner filling, it might still spill out once you make slices, but you're gonna be better off if you start with this. For our cake, for our classic birthday cake, we're just putting more filling in this thing. So you can use a scoop and then just smooth it over with a knife. I've already got this in a pastry bag. Actually, I'll save this for our frosting so I don't have to refill. So I will just grab about 1/3 of a cup is what the recipe calls for in the filling. And you don't need to be shy here. This recipe makes a ton of frosting. If you have any leftovers, it's amazing for dipping fresh strawberries into. It's like the best chocolate covered strawberries you've ever had. And then you just want to smooth this out. And you can use an offset spatula for this step. That's a great cake baking and decorating technique. Or you can use a butter knife or even just a spatula like I'm using. That might be a little too much. I'm getting a little excited here. I want to save some for the top. So I'll just smooth this out and then I'll show you how we're going to trim the second layer. If one of your cake layers comes out with a slight dome, don't worry about it. You can still use it to make your perfect layer cake. You're going to tort it like a pro. So start with a quite large serrated knife, preferably one that's thin is best here. And using your very clean hands, you're going to gently put your non-dominant hand on the top and use your dominant hand to make just a slight incision or scoring around the outside, holding your knife super level. So you're just kind of marking where you're going to cut later. And remember, you can always cut more cake off, but never add back in. So I'm just kind of adding a mark here where I'm going to cut, and I'm not going to just saw right across. I'm going to continue this circular motion and just adding slightly more pressure so that it naturally goes all the way through. You might get some extra crumbs here. It might not be perfectly flat with your first cut. That's okay. We can always go back. And I'll take a look at how I did. Don't throw away that top. You gotta save that. So it's not perfect, but we can even this out with lots of that luscious frosting. So I'm going to call that good for now. So I moved the second layer using our handy cake board back onto the cake stand. And then, pro tip, I flipped the top layer upside down because the bottom that was on the pan is super even. And so now we have a nice flat work surface. So now it's time for our crumb coat. And if a recipe calls for this, it's really important to include it if you want a smooth finish on your cake. So what we're gonna do is cover all of the outside and the top with the thinnest coat of frosting that we can possibly get on here. And what that does is it secures all of these delicious but kind of annoying cake crumbs. And that way when we do our final coat of frosting, it just goes over really smoothly and you'll get a gorgeous finish. So you can use your offset spatula or you can use a butter knife. I like to use the back edge of the butter knife if I don't have an offset spatula because this is straight. Otherwise you might get some ridges. So don't be afraid to just dive in. I like to start by putting some frosting on the top and then doing the edges after. You will undoubtedly end up with chocolate frosting everywhere. It happens no matter what you are making. If you're working with chocolate frosting, it will end up everywhere. So remember that this is going to get covered by the final layer of frosting, so you do not need to be precious about it. Just coat the whole cake evenly, let it overflow the sides. Remember, you want it to be as thin as possible, so before we finish our crumb coat, we'll go back and kind of scrape off any excess. When you're doing this step, you might want to get a separate bowl, because if there are some cake crumbs that are coming off while you're doing this step, you don't want to put that back into this bowl, because this is clean, beautiful frosting that we're using for the finish, whereas this kind of has some of those cake crumbs in it. Again, it's not a huge deal, but we're trying to bake like the pros here, so we just want to put that frosting aside. I'm going to finish covering the sides with frosting. You can also just put it on the edge and make sure you grab any of the crumb coat frosting. And then I'll show you what it looks like when it's about to go into the fridge. I like to pause between the crumb coat and the final coat and chill it for at least a half an hour. If you have time, you can even chill it overnight. And that really helps secure it, lets the butter set, and it just makes that final layer even easier. So I'm just gonna finish up this crumb coat, and you can see as I'm going around the sides, I'm scraping extra off, and I'm just gonna scrape some off from the top, and then I'll use that for the frosting on the sides. Remember, don't be a perfectionist here, because any hard work is just gonna be covered. And then we'll get this baby into the fridge once it has its full crumb coat. Our cake has its crumb coat and it's been in the fridge for about 30 minutes. And if you touch it with your fingertip, it should come away mostly clean, and that's how you know the crumbs are all locked in place and you're ready to put the final coat of frosting on, which can be a lot thicker now. And if you notice any parts of your cake that are a little bit lower than the others, just use the miracle of frosting to make it even and build it up in that low spot. Make sure that if you do want to include any piping decorations, that you set aside that amount in a bag, otherwise you might go crazy and use it all. So I'm gonna go ahead and frost this cake and you can watch. The cake now has its final layer of frosting on it, and if you're new to cake decorating or hesitant at all, I encourage you to give your cake a little bit of texture. If you want that perfectly smooth finish, you could use something like a bench knife and hold it up against the sides and do that even against the top. That's kind of a next level technique. It's much easier to see if it's not perfect. So otherwise, give it some texture. You can even use the back of a spoon to make some swoops or just do some general swirls. So now we're ready to make this look amazing. So I'm gonna show you a few easy ways to pipe frosting onto your cake that don't really require much at all. All you need is this open star tip. If you only have one tip in your kitchen, this is what it should be. It is what makes cupcakes look like they came from a bakery if you do that swirl. You can also pipe stars and shells with this tip. It's practically the only one I use. So if you're making a star, you can also practice on a plastic surface like this and scrape it back into the bag when you're ready to go. So if you're going to do a star, just hold it straight up and down and exert pressure downwards until it's as big as you want, and then press up. And if you nestle them close together, they make this really nice star pattern. So I like to do this around the base of my cakes, and it looks really nice. And if you want to do a shell, you use the same tip, hold it at an angle, exert pressure so that some of it starts coming out, go up and then down, and give it a little bit of a swish at the end. And then you do the same thing, you overlap a little bit down. And this is a great technique if you have tons of frosting that you need to use, then it makes a really nice border, especially on a sheet cake. If you are thinking, I do not want a tip, I do not want to do anything with a piping bag, there are some awesome techniques you can use too. Remember that cake that we cut off the top, you can purposefully cut more than you need and then crumble the cake into a bowl, let it dry out a little bit and it won't clump. And this looks especially good with chocolate cake, but you get these gorgeous cake crumbs, and then you can sprinkle the cake crumbs around the border so you have this nice little border, or if you have enough, you can even put them all the way up the edges of the cake using your hands or a dough scraper, and you kind of tilt it onto the sides so that you have a really nice coated cake. You can also do that with sprinkles. Super easy, looks really fun, especially for kids. My favorite way to decorate a cake that does not require a piping bag is to use fresh berries and edible flowers. It looks so fancy and you don't have to feel pressure about piping perfectly. So I'm going to do a combination, do a little bit of piping around the bottom and the top border, and then I'll come back and show you how I arrange the berries. So our classic birthday cake is fully decorated. I used a combination of fresh berries and edible flowers. I even added some fresh mint leaves for pops of color. If you do choose to use edible flowers, make sure you do your research and use ones that are safe to eat. And you also want to put your fresh berries and flowers on your cake right before serving if possible. Otherwise the flowers can wilt and the berries can bleed a little bit. So this is just one way that you can decorate a layer cake. I love using this method, but I encourage you to do whatever speaks to you. Treat your cake like blank canvas. It's a piece of art. Have fun with it. Put a little bit of your personality into it, and that will totally come through in the final product. And it's cake, so it's joyful. Enjoy it. Thank you guys so much for watching another episode of Bake It Better with me, Kai, and I am going to go enjoy this cake.